He was Hollywood's golden boy, the kind of actor who didn't just play truth, he was truth. At 23, River Phoenix had everything: fame, beauty, talent beyond his years. He was supposed to be the future, the next James Dean, the soul of a generation. But one night outside, a club owned by Johnny Depp, he collapsed on the sidewalk and never got up again. The headline said drug overdose. But that was only the ending, not the story. River Phoenix wasn't another reckless star. He was a child raised in a cult, a vegan before it was cool, a boy taught to love the world but never taught how to survive it. He gave his heart to every role, his kindness to everyone he met, and his energy to a business that demanded more than any human could give. Witnesses said that night outside the Viper Room looked like a scene from a film: flashing lights, screams, paparazzi, and a young man gasping for air while the city he loved watched him die. But what no one saw was how much he'd already been dying long before that moment, from exhaustion, pressure, and a quiet sadness that fame could never cure. They called him the boy who had it all. But maybe he was the boy who felt it all too deeply, too soon, in a world that rewards talent and punishes tenderness. River Phoenix didn't fade away. He burned too bright for too long until Hollywood couldn't hold his light anymore. Before he was a Hollywood icon, River Phoenix was a barefoot child singing for change on the streets of Latin America. His life didn't begin in fame, it began in chaos. He was born River Jude Bottom in 1970, the oldest of 5 children. His parents were drifters, idealists chasing the dream of peace and spiritual freedom. But in their search for meaning, they joined one of the most controversial religious movements of the time, the Children of God, a cult that preached love while practicing exploitation. The family lived in Venezuela as missionaries, spreading the cult's beliefs door to door. They were poor, isolated, and utterly dependent on the group. River's childhood was a blur of music, preaching, and hunger. In later interviews, he would call it chaotic, though he rarely spoke about the darker side. Years later, his mother, Arlen, admitted that leaving the cult saved her children's lives. River was only 7 when they fled, taking nothing but their guitars and a dream of something better. Back in America, the family changed their name to Phoenix, a symbol of rebirth. River took it literally. He became the protector of his siblings, the emotional core of the family. They sang together on street corners to survive, their harmonies catching the attention of passers-by. Even then, there was something otherworldly about him, a mix of purity and pain, as if he already understood too much about life. By 10, he was auditioning for television. By 12, he was acting in films. And by 15, he was being called a genius. In Stand By Me 1986, his portrayal of Chris Chambers, a boy wise beyond his years, mirrored his own soul so closely it was almost prophetic. Critics called it the performance of a lifetime. For River, it was just telling the truth. Unlike most young stars, River didn't chase fame. He ran from it. He was vegan, pacifist, deeply spiritual. He read philosophy, played guitar, and lived in small, cluttered houses surrounded by family. Directors adored him because he brought something rare: sincerity in an industry built on masks. He didn't act to impress, he acted to understand. But Hollywood doesn't know what to do with people like River Phoenix. His honesty made him luminous and dangerous. He turned down roles that were too violent or shallow. He refused to lie for publicity. He wanted art to mean something. To executives, that made him unpredictable. To fans, it made him mythic. By the time he was 20, River had worked with Sidney Lumet, Peter Weir, and Gus Van Sant. He was nominated for an Oscar at 18. But even as his career soared, he seemed to drift further away from the world he was conquering. He was too smart for the machine, too gentle for the hunger around him. And somewhere along the way, between set calls and sleepless nights, the boy who wanted to save the world began to lose himself inside it. He once said, "I want to buy a piece of land and live quietly. Hollywood isn't real." But the city doesn't let its angels go easily. By the early 1990 seconds, River Phoenix had everything the world said it wanted. Youth, beauty, fame, and talent, so rare it frightened people. But inside, he was crumbling. He was 20 when he filmed My Own Private Idaho, 1991, a role that would define him. Directed by Gus Van Sant, the film followed 2 street hustlers searching for love and identity in a world that had already forgotten them. River played Mike, a fragile, lost soul suffering from narcolepsy, and he played him with such aching honesty that it blurred the line between acting and confession. Many said it was his masterpiece. Others said it broke him. On screen, he embodied pain so deeply that people saw their own loneliness reflected in him. Off screen, he carried that pain home. He told friends he had nightmares, that he couldn't shake the sadness of the character. He started retreating from the spotlight, from Hollywood parties, from interviews that treated him like a symbol instead of a person. River was idealistic to the point of torment. He refused to wear leather, donated money to animal rights groups, and gave away most of his paycheck to friends or charities. Yet the same industry that praised his purity used it to market him. He became the poster child for sensitive Hollywood. But the pressure to stay perfect, the beautiful boy with the conscience, was crushing. He loved music more than fame. In 1988, he formed a band called Aleka's Attic with his sister Rain. Their songs were poetic, raw, and unfiltered reflections of a young man desperate to find truth in a world built on illusion. But while he was trying to escape, Hollywood kept pulling him back. By 1992, River was working non-stop, one movie after another, little rest, constant expectations. The studios wanted him as their next megastar. He wanted peace. Friends said he began experimenting with drugs, not out of recklessness, but exhaustion. The pressure, the insomnia, the loneliness, it all blurred into a quiet spiral. Then came Dark Blood, a low-budget thriller that would become his final film. During the shoot, River was pale, distracted, thinner than ever. His friends begged him to take a break, but he refused. "I just want to finish this," he told them. On the night of October 30th, 1993, River arrived at the Viper Room, a nightclub partly owned by Johnny Depp, with his girlfriend Samantha Mathis, his brother Joaquin Phoenix, and his sister Rain. He seemed anxious but sober. Witnesses said he didn't want to be there. Sometime after midnight, River stepped outside, pale and shaking. Within minutes, he collapsed on the sidewalk. Joaquin called 911, his trembling voice recorded forever in that haunting emergency call. Paramedics tried to revive him for 20 minutes. At 1:51 a.m., River Phoenix was pronounced dead. He was 23. The coroner ruled it a drug overdose, a lethal mix of heroin and cocaine, known as a speedball. But friends and family insisted that wasn't the full story. They said River wasn't an addict, that he had been clean, that someone had handed him something that night, something he didn't know was laced. Whatever the truth, Hollywood lost more than a star that night. It lost its conscience. In the days that followed, fans gathered outside the Viper Room, leaving candles, flowers, and letters. Johnny Depp closed the club for a week. Keanu Reeves, River's closest friend, disappeared from public view. And Joaquin, just 19 at the time, never fully recovered from what he saw. The boy who once spoke about saving the planet died alone on a sidewalk under flashing neon lights. And Hollywood moved on. The official version of River Phoenix's death was clean, clinical, and easy to print. Accidental overdose outside the Viper Room. But the truth, as always in Hollywood, was more complicated and far more tragic. River wasn't a reckless addict. He was terrified of drugs. Friends said he'd faint at the sight of a needle. He was obsessive about health, vegan, sober, the face of youth activism. But in the weeks before his death, something shifted. He was exhausted, overworked, and surrounded by people who blurred the line between friendship and fame. Some whispered that he'd started using to stay awake on film sets. Others said he was pushed that people around him wanted to keep him functional, profitable. Inside the Viper Room, the atmosphere that night was chaotic: drugs, alcohol, and celebrity colliding in a space that felt more like a ritual than a party. Witnesses later claimed River took a liquid dose of heroin-laced cocaine given to him by someone in the club. Within minutes, he was trembling, sweating, gasping for air. Instead of calling for help immediately, those around him panicked, afraid of what a scandal could do to their careers. They dragged him outside, hoping the cool air would help. He fell onto the sidewalk and began convulsing. His brother Joaquin, just 19, screamed for help. His sister Rain tried to resuscitate him. Paparazzi watched from across the street, capturing the chaos as sirens approached. By the time paramedics arrived, the damage was irreversible. When the autopsy report was released, tabloids devoured it, turning River's body into spectacle, his death into clickbait before the word even existed. His friends, like Keanu Reeves and Samantha Mathis, withdrew from public life. In interviews years later, Mathis said, "He wasn't supposed to die that night. He was clean. He didn't want to be there. Something went wrong." Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. That the Viper Room was a playground for Hollywood's elite. a place where fame and darkness met under flashing lights. Some claimed River was experimenting for the first time that night. Others said he'd been slipping for months, quietly crying out for rest. But Hollywood doesn't rest. It only sells. Within days, studios erased his name from upcoming projects, reshot films, and pushed new faces into the spotlight. His unfinished movie Dark Blood was shelved indefinitely. The industry he'd carried on his shoulders replaced him before the candles at his vigil had burned out. And yet, the shock lingered, because River wasn't like the others. He wasn't self-destructive or cynical. He was sincere. His death felt like punishment for caring too much in a place that doesn't reward kindness. In one of his last interviews, he said, "I don't want to be cool. I just want to be real. But sometimes, real hurts." After his death, a new narrative emerged, one that would follow Hollywood forever. The idea that purity can't survive the machine. River Phoenix wasn't destroyed by drugs. He was destroyed by an industry that treats sensitivity as weakness and burnout as the price of brilliance. He died surrounded by people who loved him, yet completely alone because no one knew how to save someone who only wanted peace. River once said he wanted to disappear and live on a farm, away from fame, away from cameras. Maybe that was his prophecy. Maybe, in some way, he did. Because legends don't fade. They just leave too soon, taking the truth with them. From this channel's perspective, River Phoenix was never meant to be a Hollywood star. He was meant to be a human being who felt everything too deeply. But in a city that rewards performance over presence, that gift became his downfall. Hollywood has a pattern. It builds myths out of fragile people, sells their pain as art, and then pretends to mourn them when they collapse. River wasn't a product of that system. He was a rejection of it. He stood for sincerity in an industry addicted to spectacle. That's why his death felt like a collective guilt. Because deep down, the world didn't just lose River Phoenix, it consumed him. He didn't chase fame. Fame chased him, and when it caught him, it never let go. From the moment he starred in Stand By Me, people projected purity onto him, the perfect boy, the moral compass, the angel of Generation X. But no one asked if he wanted to carry that weight. No one asked what it does to a 20-year-old to be called the future of cinema. River's death exposed what Hollywood fears most, that the system doesn't protect its brightest souls, it drains them. He wasn't destroyed by addiction alone. He was destroyed by exhaustion, by idealism, by the impossibility of being good in a world that profits from pretending. He tried to live clean, love deeply, and stay honest, but honesty doesn't sell headlines. After his death, the media called him a fallen idol. They missed the point. River wasn't an idol. He was a warning, a mirror reflecting back everything Hollywood tries to hide. That sensitivity is treated like weakness and truth like a threat. The tragedy of River Phoenix is that he saw the darkness and tried to love through it. He wasn't running from fame, he was running toward peace. And in the end, the world mistook that search for self-destruction. This channel believes River's legacy isn't about his death or even his stardom. It's about what he stood for: integrity, compassion, and a refusal to fake who he was. That's what makes him eternal. Because while most stars burn out, River didn't. He transcended. Every generation has one, the artist who burns too bright, too fast, too purely. River Phoenix was ours. And the question that remains is not how he died, but what Hollywood lost when he did. There's a moment in Stand By Me, River Phoenix, standing by the railroad tracks, the sun cutting across his face. He looks straight into the camera, quiet but unflinching, as if he already knows something the rest of the world doesn't. That scene, that look, feels like a message, now a whisper from someone who understood that life, like childhood, isn't meant to last forever. When River died, time seemed to pause. The world lost not just a talent, but a possibility, a glimpse of what cinema could have been if sincerity had been allowed to survive. His death marked the end of a certain kind of Hollywood, one where vulnerability was strength, where truth mattered more than image. Yet somehow, his light never went out. You can see it in the performances of those who came after him, in the quiet depth of actors like Leonardo DiCaprio, Joaquin Phoenix, Timothée Chalamet. You can feel it in every film that dares to tell the truth, even when it hurts. River's spirit became a language, a way of acting, of being that still lives in the spaces between words. He once said, "I don't want to be remembered for how I died. I want to be remembered for how I lived." And maybe that's the point. River's story isn't a cautionary tale about fame, it's a love letter to authenticity. He lived without compromise, even when it cost him everything. The Viper Room is still there, the city still glows. But sometimes, if you walk past that corner on Sunset Boulevard, it feels like the air still carries something, a pulse, a memory, a quiet trace of the boy who burned too bright. Because legends don't die, they transform. River Phoenix didn't fade, he became light. Some stories were never meant to be known. But now,